Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Eclectic Producer. Well, as you can see, we're starting to finally make some progress with the R2-D2 dome. Still a lot of work to go, but things are starting to shape up. And a lot of that is due to the changes that were just made to the printer. A big part of it was getting the final parts for the Bondtech DDX and turning it into the version 3, which is a new back and a new front. With the new DDX V3, it mounted onto the Ender 6 exactly like the video shows, and I'll include a link on that down below. It was actually quite easy to install when I had the right version, so that's a good thing. Setting it up is pretty easy. I went through my normal tuning processes, doing temp towers and retract tests and things. Got some very good results very, very quickly. Then I went ahead and tried to print one of my larger pieces, like the one that's printing right now. And this is the base of it. The very bottom, I'll cover that up, looks really, really good. The first layer went down perfectly. When it started to work on the second and third layers, though, I started getting these little blobs and blips all through the thing. And eventually, at one point, there was a really large deposit of material that just sort of blobbed onto it and then melted all the way through. So going through and making some changes, finally figured out what the main cause of it was. This is running at 40 millimeters per second for the main layers, which is about as fast as I can go. But the main thing that made the difference was turning on the cooling fan. With the fan off, the blobbing stopped, which was really surprising. So you can see, I don't know how well the detail shows up, but you can see the blobs through here with the fan on, and then over here with the fan off. It actually did quite a bit better with the fan off. So I went ahead and turned it off, started over, got the settings right, and keeping my fingers crossed, it's been running now for 26 hours and 19 minutes, and it's still looking really good. So let's hope that that stays. With this upgrade, I did two things. First, I replaced the extruder and the regular print head, which included the Bowden tube assembly, with the Bondtech DDX, and as I mentioned, with the updated back and front, so it's the version 3. I also added the MicroSwiss all-metal Hotend. That was mainly done so I can work with higher temperatures. I did do some tests with the Bondtech direct drive extruder with the original head, and it actually worked out pretty well. It wasn't what I wanted to do, so I went ahead and actually mounted it to the MicroSwiss and started using it that way, and having so far really good results with that. And in doing some experiments on my own, I realized that one of the big problems that I was having is, because this PETG that I'm printing is fairly flexible and the filament itself is actually a little bit stretchy, I think a lot of what was happening is with the long Bowden tube, it was pushing into the tube, compressing slightly, maybe even folding up inside of it, and then when it would retract, all it would really do is tighten it up even more. So the pressure at the print head was still fairly high, and that's why I never really saw any results with the retraction settings. Once I went to the direct drive, the retraction settings make a huge difference. I have a small sample here. I did it with the retraction tower and started with absolutely zero retraction, and then went up in 0.5 millimeter steps. And at the second step, at only 0.5 millimeter retraction, most of the stringing is gone. At 1 millimeter, there's just a tiny bit, and at 1.5, it's really not noticeable at all. So I chose 1.5 as my value. I went through and tried different temperatures and things, and that retraction amount seemed to be about right. So I'm going to stay with that. I have the retraction speed running at about 25 millimeters per second. I've tried different rates. It made some difference, but 25 seemed to be a nice number, so I'll stick with that for the time being. With the Ender 6, as it comes stock, I would say that it's really, really nice at doing PLA or PLA+. The Bowden tube seems to be fine with that. The way the extruder works is fine. Overall, I would say it's a great machine if you stay with PLA. Once you start going to softer materials, then things need to start to change. So going with a direct drive extruder is definitely a must if the material's soft. If you're going to go to higher temperature materials, it's time to consider the all-metal Hotend. Otherwise, the the tube inside the original Hotend would start to melt. It can degrade and cause clogging issues. It can also sometimes retract slightly if you don't get it in there very tightly. And then if it does retract a little bit and the material can come up and ooze underneath it, then it gets really clogged, and then it's very, very difficult to deal with. That has happened a few times, even with PLA, because I didn't get the tube in there and then tighten down everything to really get in there really snugly. With the all-metal Hotend, that should not be an issue because all the melted material stays down in the metal section. There's no interface where material can start to ooze out. However, I found out on my very first print, it's important to get the nozzle in there very tightly. I had put it in and loosened it for some reason, forgot to tighten it up, and it created a huge mess. But that was my fault. I just didn't put it in there tight, and all of a sudden the material started oozing out the sides. But I cleaned it up and put it all back together, and everything was fine. But when you do tighten it up, make sure you do use a wrench on it. With this particular Hotend, they actually suggest using a crescent wrench to hold on to the block and then use the little small wrench to tighten up the nozzle, and that worked really nicely. It is a little bit of a hassle because you have to take the fans off to get to it with this, but hopefully that doesn't happen very often, so you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. The other thing that was surprising going to the Bondtech is how quiet it is. I didn't realize that most of the noise I had been hearing was from my extruder and its motor. It was quite loud, and at times it would slip, be really loud when it would do that, and get this knocking sound, lots of noise when it was retracting. It was actually a fairly noisy machine, but once I switched over to the Bondtech, now it's very, very quiet. As you can hear, it's running right now, and it's been doing some really long motions from one side of the part to the other and doing lots and lots of retractions, and you can't hear much of anything. So overall, I'd say it's doing a really good job. That's it for now. We'll see what happens. We're definitely making some real progress, and hope I can get going on some of these larger parts and really see this thing start to come together. So until next time, take care. Bye.